The music thumped like a frantic heartbeat, a sound so loud Ariana could feel it vibrating in her bones. The grand ballroom was a swirling sea of silk, diamonds, and fake laughter. Everyone was there, but no one was really there to have fun. They were there to be seen, to gain favor, to show loyalty to the most powerful and feared man in the city, Gavino. Ariana, a guest of a friend who'd begged her for moral support, felt like a small, plain bird trapped in a cage of glittering peacocks. She stood by a towering ice sculpture, her simple blue dress a quiet island in the noisy room. Her eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the crowd not for important people, but for an escape from the overwhelming pressure. That's when she saw him. In a shadowy corner, far from the orchestra and the chattering clusters of people, a young man was sitting on the floor. He wasn't slumped in defeat or drunkenness. He was focused, intensely so. He had a small, velvet pouch, and from it he was carefully placing smooth, shiny stones onto the polished marble floor, arranging them in a complex, spiraling pattern. The light from a nearby sconce caught the flecks of gold in the stones, making them gleam like tiny, captured stars. This was Kai, the boss's son. Ariana had heard the whispers. Strange. Unreachable. A ghost in his own house. People were scared of his father, a man with a gaze like cold steel, and so they were scared of Kai, too. They didn't know how to talk to him, so they chose not to. As she watched, a woman in a towering feathered headdress swept past Kai, her gown swishing just inches from his carefully laid stones. She didn't even glance down. Another man, laughing loudly with a glass of champagne, pointed subtly in Kai's direction and muttered something to his companion, who shook his head with a pitying smirk. They saw him as a piece of furniture, a problem, a puzzle not worth solving. A deep, hot anger began to simmer in Ariana's chest. It was so profoundly wrong. Without a second thought, a plan forming not in her head but in her heart, she began to move. Weaving through the crowd, she ignored the curious glances. She felt the weight of Gavino's presence from across the room, a silent, watchful mountain of a man, but she didn't look his way. Her entire world had narrowed to that quiet corner and the lonely figure on the floor. She reached the edge of the noisy part of the room, and the sounds faded into a dull roar. She didn't announce herself. She didn't ask if she could join him. She simply walked over, her movements slow and deliberate, and then, gathering the fabric of her dress, she sank to the floor. She sat a respectful few feet away, close enough to be present, but far enough to not crowd him or threaten his space. The cold marble seeped through her dress, a shocking contrast to the stuffy air. Kai's hands, which had been placing a piece of obsidian, stilled. His shoulders tensed. He didn't look up, but Ariana could see the rapid flutter of a pulse in his neck. He was aware of her, a new variable in his controlled environment. She said nothing. She just sat, folding her hands in her lap, and looked at his stone spiral. It was beautiful, a silent language of order and beauty in a chaotic world. She focused on her breathing, keeping it calm and even, hoping he would sense she was not a threat. A long minute passed. The party continued to swirl behind them, a world away. Then slowly his head turned. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, met hers. They were not empty, as the whispers said. They were deep, intelligent, and filled with a wariness that made her heart ache. He looked directly at her, a quick, assessing glance. Then his gaze dropped to the stones. He picked up a stone, a piece of milky quartz, and held it out in her direction, not looking at her, his attention fixed on the spiral. It wasn't an offer, not quite. It was a test. Ariana's breath hitched. This was the moment. If she moved too fast, spoke too loudly, took the stone the wrong way, the fragile connection would shatter. She leaned forward, just a little, and gently, so gently, plucked the quartz from his open palm. Her fingertips barely brushed his skin, but the contact sent a tiny, electric spark up her arm. It was the briefest touch, but it felt more intimate than any dance in the crowded room. She held the cool, smooth stone, looking at it as if it were a great treasure. Then she looked at the spiral, at the space where he seemed to be guiding her. Carefully, she reached out and placed the quartz in a gap in the pattern. It fit perfectly. Kai let out a breath she didn't realize he'd been holding. His posture relaxed a fraction. He selected another stone, a deep red jasper, and placed it next to her quartz. Then he looked at her again, and this time, his gaze held for a second longer. "The noise is a physical weight," he said, his voice low and quiet but clear. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a raw piece of truth offered to her. Ariana nodded, understanding completely. "It feels like sandpaper on my skin," she replied softly, matching his quiet tone. The flicker of something, surprise, recognition, crossed his face. He gave a single, sharp nod. He reached into his pouch and pulled out another stone, this one a shimmering piece of labradorite, its colors shifting from blue to green in the light. He didn't hand it to her this time. Instead, he placed it directly in front of her, an invitation to continue. They fell into a rhythm, a silent, shared purpose. He would choose a stone, she would place one. They were building something together, a tiny fortress of calm against the storm of the party. Ariana forgot about the feathered ladies and the laughing men. She forgot about the powerful boss. There was only the cool marble, the beautiful stones, and the quiet, fascinating man beside her. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. The music seemed to stutter. Ariana looked up, her heart leaping into her throat. Gavino stood over them, his immense frame blocking the light. His face was an unreadable mask, his eyes, so like his son's but infinitely colder, scanned the scene. His son on the floor, a strange young woman beside him, and the intricate stone spiral they had built together. The air grew thick and heavy. Kai's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. He stared rigidly at the stones, his brief moment of peace shattered. The boss's gaze, which had seen violence and commanded fear, finally settled on Ariana. He looked from her face, to her simple blue dress, to the way she was sitting so naturally on his palace floor. The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Ariana's blood ran cold. What had she done? Had she broken an unspoken rule? Had she offended the most dangerous man in the city? Then, the boss did something utterly unexpected. He slowly, deliberately, lowered himself onto one knee. The expensive fabric of his suit strained. He was so close Ariana could smell his expensive cologne. He didn't look at her. He looked at his son, and then at the stone spiral. He reached out a large, heavy hand, and for a terrifying second, Ariana thought he was going to sweep their beautiful creation away. Instead, his thick fingers hovered over the stones. He picked up a single, black onyx that Kai had placed at the spiral's very center. He held it up, the black stone looking small and dark in his powerful palm. He turned his head, and his stormy eyes locked directly with Ariana's. The intensity in his gaze was overwhelming, a silent demand for an answer. In a voice like grinding gravel, low and meant only for them, he spoke a single, loaded question that hung in the air between them, a cliffhanger that would decide everything. "Who?" he asked, his eyes boring into hers. "Are you?" The silence after the boss's question was heavier than any noise the party could produce. Ariana's mouth felt dry. She looked from the boss's intense, unreadable face to Kai, who had gone perfectly still, his shoulders hunched as if waiting for a blow. "My name is Ariana," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. She did not look away from the boss. "I was admiring the stones." The boss's eyes narrowed, studying her. He glanced at his son, then back at the spiral on the floor. He closed his large hand around the onyx, and for a heart-stopping moment, Ariana was sure he would crush it. Instead, he stood up, his joints cracking in the sudden quiet. He looked down at Kai. "The girl may visit tomorrow," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then he turned and walked away, melting back into the crowd, the black onyx still clutched in his fist. The next day, Ariana arrived at the imposing iron gates of the mansion, her heart thumping a wild rhythm against her ribs. She half expected to be turned away. But the gate swung open, and a silent, serious man led her not to the grand ballroom, but to a sun-drenched conservatory filled with strange, fragrant plants. Kai was there, sitting on a stone bench, a thick book about constellations open on his lap. He looked up as she entered, his stormy eyes wide with what she hoped was surprise, not alarm. "You came back," he stated, as if confirming a fascinating but unlikely fact. "I said I would," she replied softly. That was the beginning of their secret world. Ariana visited almost every day. At first, they simply existed in the same quiet spaces. She would find him in the library, organizing books by the color of their spines, and she would sit and read her own novel, the only sound the soft rustle of turning pages. She learned that his silence was not empty, it was full of deep, swirling thoughts. Then, one afternoon in the garden, he began to talk. He pointed to the first evening star twinkling in the lavender sky. "That's Venus," he said. "It's not a star at all. It's a planet, covered in thick, poisonous clouds, with a surface hot enough to melt lead." Ariana listened, enchanted. "It's beautiful, even if it's dangerous." Kai looked at her, a slight frown on his face. "That is an illogical but pleasant way to see it." He spoke to her in a way no one else ever had, with absolute, blunt honesty. He didn't use flattery or hidden meanings. When she asked him a question, he gave her the complete, detailed truth. It was like a cool, clear drink of water after a lifetime of sipping mud. He taught her about the violent storms on Jupiter, the diamond rains on Neptune, and the theory that our universe might be one of many, like bubbles in a vast sea. Their world was built in these hidden corners of the estate, far from the armed guards and the tense, whispered conversations about territory and debts. They were in the garden watching bees drone from flower to flower, in his quiet room where the walls were painted a deep, calming blue, on the flat roof of a forgotten turret where the city lights below looked like a reflection of the stars above. Their friendship was a slow, sweet bloom. It grew in the shared silence and the shared facts. The first time their hands touched was over a star chart. Ariana was tracing the line of Orion's belt with her finger, and Kai's hand was resting beside hers. As she moved, her pinky finger brushed against his. A jolt, warm and electric, passed between them. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. Slowly, carefully, he turned his hand and laced his fingers through hers. His palm was warm, his grip firm and certain. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, the map of the heavens spread out before them, a silent promise passing between their linked hands. The real shift happened on a rainy afternoon. They were in the library, and a sudden, fierce gust of wind rattled the window panes, blowing a loose strand of hair across Ariana's face. She went to brush it away, but Kai's hand moved first. He stopped, his fingers hovering just inches from her cheek. He was watching the strand of hair as if it were a complex equation. His breathing was shallow. Ariana held perfectly still, her own heart hammering. Touch was difficult for him, something he usually controlled with great effort. For him to initiate it was a monumental act. Hesitantly, his fingers moved forward. They were trembling slightly. With a touch as light as a butterfly's wing, he gently hooked the stray strand of her golden hair and tucked it behind her ear. His fingertips grazed the sensitive skin of her temple and the curve of her ear, and the contact was so intensely intimate it stole her breath. It was a whisper of a touch, but it screamed of feeling. He pulled his hand back, his eyes wide, as if surprised by his own bravery. He looked directly into her eyes, his gaze open and vulnerable. "Your hair," he said, his voice low and rough with emotion. "It is like captured sunlight." The air in the room grew thick and warm. The simple, honest words, combined with the daring of his touch, created a spark that seemed to ignite between them. This was their version of spicy, not a roaring fire, but a slow, deep, smoldering heat built on trust and a profound understanding. It was more intense than any dramatic kiss could have been. In that moment, they were the only two people in the world. Ariana reached out and, mirroring his courage, placed her hand over his where it rested on the table. "Thank you, Kai," she whispered. From the doorway, unseen by either of them, Gavino watched. He had come to check on his son, a daily ritual. He saw the way Kai was looking at Ariana, not with his usual guarded distance, but with a soft, open warmth the boss had never seen before. He saw the confidence in his son's posture, the ease with which he had reached out. He saw the way the girl, Ariana, didn't flinch or demand, but simply accepted the gesture for the treasure it was. The boss was a hard man. His life was built on violence, suspicion, and power. He had never known a love like the one unfolding quietly in his library. He saw that this young woman did not look at his son and see a problem, or a weapon, or a key to his fortune. She looked at Kai and saw Kai. She saw the stars in his eyes and the quiet universe in his mind. He didn't step into the room. He didn't say a word. He simply watched for a moment longer, a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirring in his chest. It was a feeling of peace, of rightness. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and walked away, leaving them in their secret world. He had given his silent, but absolute, approval. The peace of their secret world was as fragile as a glass star. The real world, with its violence and rivalries, was always just outside the garden wall. The Mancini family, hungry for more power, saw the boss's softened focus, his quiet approval of the girl who made his son smile, as a weakness. And they decided to strike at what they thought was the easiest target, the broken son. It happened on one of their walks. Ariana and Kai were following a familiar path through a secluded part of the estate's gardens, Kai explaining how the phases of the moon worked, his hands moving in precise arcs through the air. Suddenly, 3 men dressed in dark clothes stepped from behind the tall hedges, blocking their way. They were Mancini men, their faces hard and their intentions clear. Well, the leader sneered, his eyes locked on Kai. The little prince taking a stroll. Your father needs to be reminded of his place. A little scare should do it. Kai froze. The sudden confrontation, the aggressive tones, the invasion of his safe space. It was a sensory assault. He took a sharp step back, his hands coming up to press against his ears, his eyes squeezing shut. He was retreating, disappearing into the safety of his own mind. The men laughed, a cruel, grating sound. See? Useless. But they had not accounted for Ariana. A fierce, protective fury, cold and sharp, flashed through her. She didn't scream or cry. In one fluid, determined motion, she stepped directly in front of Kai, placing her body between him and the danger. She spread her arms wide, a human shield in a simple summer dress. You will not touch him, she said, her voice low and steady, though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. She looked the leader directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. You want to get to his father? You go through me first. The men were taken aback. This was not in their plan. The leader recovered, smirking. And what are you going to do, little girl? I am the one who sees him, she fired back, her voice gaining strength. And I am telling you to get off this property. Now. In that moment, she was not just kind Ariana. She was a force. Her love for Kai was not a quiet, gentle thing. It was a shield, a sword, a roaring fire. He was not a burden. He was her reason to find a courage she never knew she possessed. Behind her, a change was happening. Kai, hearing Ariana's strong, clear voice cutting through his panic, slowly lowered his hands. He opened his eyes. He saw the straight line of her back, the way she held herself between him and the world. She was protecting him. And a new, powerful feeling surged through him, the need to protect her. His mind, which often struggled with the chaos of people, was a master of details. While the men were focused on Ariana, his eyes, sharp and observant, were cataloging everything. The chipped tooth on the leader when he smirked. The distinct, snakehead tattoo peeking from under the second man's collar. The license plate of the black car idling just beyond the gate, which he had memorized in a single glance when they first arrived. The car, Kai said, his voice quiet but cutting through the tension. Everyone turned to look at him. He was no longer cowering. He was focused, his gaze intense. License plate 74J, XB8. The man on the left has a tattoo of a viper on his neck, partially obscured. The one speaking has a damaged canine tooth on the right side. They are the same men who followed my father's shipment last Thursday at the West Side docks. They are using a Mancini-owned warehouse on Harbor Drive, Unit 12. The one with the green door. The men stared, their smug confidence dissolving into stunned silence. The leader's face went pale. This was not the helpless boy they had been told about. This was a living, breathing surveillance system. Before they could react, the sound of shouting and running feet echoed through the garden. The boss's security, alerted by the disturbance, swarmed the path, quickly surrounding and disarming the intruders. The boss himself arrived, his face a thundercloud. He listened as his head guard relayed the information Kai had just recited. He looked at his son, who was now standing tall beside Ariana, their hands clasped tightly together. He saw the fierce protectiveness in Ariana's eyes and the sharp, powerful intelligence in his son's. In that moment, the boss saw them not as a quiet boy and his gentle friend, but as a partnership, a team. He saw Kai's unique mind for what it truly was, a formidable strength. He gave a grim, approving nod to Kai, a look of pure, unvarnished respect. Then his men dragged the Mancini thugs away. The threat was over. Weeks later, under a canopy of 1,000,000 twinkling stars, their forever began. There was no big church, no crowd of strangers. It was just them, in the very garden where they had faced danger and found their strength. Gavino stood as a quiet witness, a rare softness in his eyes. Kai, dressed in a simple, comfortable suit, held Ariana's hands. He didn't need a priest or a long speech. His own words were the truest vow he could ever give. He looked into her eyes, his stormy gaze clear and full of love. "You are my favorite person," he said, his voice strong and sure. "My world began when you sat on the floor." Tears of pure joy streamed down Ariana's face. She squeezed his hands. "And I will be your safe place," she promised, her voice a soft whisper that held the strength of a vow. "You're quiet in the noise. You're forever." As they sealed their promise with a kiss, gentle and full of a love that had conquered fear and silence, the stars above seemed to shine just for them. Their love story, which started with a simple, kind act on a cold marble floor, had become their unshakable, beautiful forever. This story of quiet courage and fierce love proves that the strongest bonds are often forged in the softest moments. If this journey of Ariana and Kai touched your heart, then subscribe to the channel. We have many more tales of unique love and unexpected heroes waiting for you. A single click lets you know that stories like this matter. We would love to hear from you, our wonderful audience. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in bustling Mumbai, a quiet town in Canada, or under the sunny skies of Brazil? Share your thoughts about the story. Did Ariana's bravery inspire you? Did Kai's quiet strength resonate with you? Let's build our own community, right here, united by a love of stories that celebrate seeing the real person inside. We read every single comment.